Just before this BBC podcast gets underway, here's something you may not know. My name's Linda Davies, and I commission podcasts for BBC Sounds. As you'd expect, at the BBC we make podcasts of the very highest quality, featuring the most knowledgeable experts and genuinely engaging voices. What you may not know is that the BBC makes podcasts about all kinds of things, like pop stars, poltergeists, cricket, and conspiracy theories, and that's just a few examples. If you'd like to discover something a little bit unexpected, find your next podcast over at BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, bringing you all the news, the views and analysis that you need. It's Wednesday, the 10th of April. I'm Gavin Wallace, and the Dundee pitch saga rumbles on.
It's a crazy situation. Okay, it can happen in extreme circumstances. And I don't think the last few years in all the top leagues it ever happened.
After defeat for Wraith last night, Dundee United are closing in on a return to the Premiership.
Huge result, but probably merited with the level of performance, especially in that kind of first half and early part of the second half.
And
finally we won a competitive game, isn't it?
Scotland get their Euro 2025 qualification campaign going with a narrow win over Slovakia.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, bringing you all the news, the views and analysis that you need. It's Wednesday, the 10th of April. I'm Gavin Wallace. Joining me on this episode of the podcast from The Athletic is Jordan Campbell and the former Rangers and Dundee frontman, as well as Falkirk, Rory Loy. Good morning to the both of you, gents. How are we?
Morning, Gav. All good.
I should say we are recording this at around about 10 to 7 in the morning just now of the day of Rangers against Dundee. There is a pitch inspection at 11 o'clock, Rory, so we're not really sure at this stage, if people are listening later on in the podcast, we're not really sure yet whether the game is or is not going to be on, are we?
No, we're not, and I think everyone's just got their fingers crossed that it goes ahead, that Dundee can get their home games played between now and the end of the season, and they can fix whatever the issue is in the summer, Gav.
Indeed. Jordan, just a quick one before we hit the headlines this morning. Big game for Arsenal last night. You cover them. That was quite intriguing and exciting, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit of a late night last night, but it was certainly entertaining, top-class football. So, but I'm always happy to come back to my spiritual home. Right, as ever then, gents, tons to get through. So let's have a quick look at the Scottish football headlines this morning. The Dens Park pitch drama continues. Rangers boss Philippe Clement called it a crazy situation and a bad image for the league. Should the game go ahead, Rangers can return to the top of the Premiership with a win. The top of the Championship looks settled after Wraith lost to Airdrie last night. Dundee United are 4 points clear with 4 to play. And 3 extra players could make it to the Euros, with UEFA considering bigger squads for the tournament.
The Scottish Football Podcast.
Right, first up then, guys. I think it's a bit obvious where we're going to start on today's episode. The Dens Park pitch. Rory, you've spent a lot of time in Dundee. You've played there many times, even out with being a player there. Has it always been an issue, or is this just something we've seen in the last couple of seasons at Dens?
Well, I played there for a few years, and I don't think I ever remember a game being called off. That's not to say the pitch was always in perfect conditions, but the 2 groundsmen we had at the time were very good. I know that they've been put on garden leave this season, so whether that's played an impact, I'm not quite sure. But it's not a good look for the game, as Philippe Clement has said. It's not ideal. It's but we just need to concentrate on trying to get the game on, because as I said before, we just want Dundee to be able to complete their home games, and they can fix the issue in the summer. But it certainly didn't look good on Saturday for quality of football and safety, welfare of the players. So let's just hope that tonight it's in slightly better condition than it was on Saturday. It's clearly not going to be in good condition, but hopefully it's good enough that the players are looked after and the game goes ahead.
Why do you think it is so bad?
Well, it's the weather, Gaff, and the draining issue. I'm no expert on pitches, but the drainage, you can't get the water off the pitch, so it all has to be done manually. So the water's just sitting on the pitch, and then there's certain areas of the pitch which aren't as good as others, and it's causing severe waterlogging in some areas, which then, when it does dry out, is affecting the quality of the pitch, and the ball isn't bouncing in certain areas as well, which in turn can be dangerous for players to play on. So I think it's a drainage issue as far as I'm aware, and I think they've struggled with it massively. Well, clearly
Yeah, I think ultimately player safety has to be at the forefront of this, swiftly followed by fans obviously getting there. But if you're the likes of, Blair Spittle, who, moving on, you don't want to be going into games. Obviously they played Motherwell, Dundee played Motherwell at the weekend, and Motherwell were not happy. So you maybe end up in a situation where players may receive or take on a really serious injury. That's not what we want. Jordan, should the SPFL have more powers over this? Should they be re-looking things in the close season? Should there be sanctions imposed, maybe?
Yeah, I think there's got to be more structure around this issue, and definitely more form of punishment available to the governing body, because, I mean, this is one thing, struggling with the weather, but there's certain games. I mean, there's 4 games been called off already at Dens Park, and this will be the 6th game now that there's been an inspection. So, I mean, it's getting to a farcical situation where it's having reputational damage for Scottish football as well. I'm based down here, and you like to promote Scottish football, but the amount of times people are saying to me, "Oh, what's going on in Dundee?" It's almost becoming they can't believe what's happening, and it seems surprising to them that there's not something, there's not a deterrent there for Dundee to sort this issue out. I know they're going to try and sort of limp on to the summer and then fix it, but we're talking about the fans travelling during the day. They still don't know what their plans are today, how they're going to get there, what time they need to go. And it's fine having a pitch inspection at 11 a.m, but if they pass it at that point and then it rains the rest of the day, we do live in Scotland, so it does seem a little bit short-sighted to say 11 a.m and then we'll put it on. But I think something's got to be in the rule book, because there's so much talk about plastic pitches and what that does for Scottish football on TV, but is that any worse than the current situation where we've got a grass pitch that clearly hasn't been prioritised in Dundee's budget?
Rory, clearly players want to play on a grass pitch week in, week out, but there's places like Kilmarnock, Livingston, Falkirk, Hamilton that have all got these artificial surfaces, and they don't really suffer from things like that. But then again, a really good and well looked after grass pitch, you don't get these issues, do you?
No, you don't. And as Jordan says, it clearly hasn't been a priority for Dundee this season. They've made quite a few signings, good, strong signings at that, who'll be on decent wages. So maybe, they should have prioritised a little bit more into the pitch. I don't know exactly how much it has went into it. However, I mean, the thing is, at this stage, with the issue being there, barring, taking the pitch off and putting a new one down, they don't have time to do that. So they simply can't fix it. I do agree that it's becoming farcical, but the issue's there. It's not going away. So, what can you do other than have a pitch inspection and try and manage it as best you can, because you can't click your fingers and get a brand new pitch down. I do agree that it's not a good look, and it's becoming a wee bit silly now, but I just don't see what Dundee can do. Yes, the mistake's been made, but you can't fix it between now and the end of the season. So, look, and you touch on Blair Spittle. Blair Spittle's got a contract at Hearts, so if, touch wood, the worst was to happen, it's the players that are out of contract and the players who are on modest wages who, if they suffer an injury and they've got no club, it's them that's a concern in my eyes, because I've been in that position. It's not players who are signed up for next season who'll get due care and attention. It's players who are putting themselves at risk of being out of contract and being on the sidelines.
John, I just want to touch on one more thing before we move on. Today it's an evening game, so it might well be a lot easier for fans to prepare. Should there be, should it pass the pitch inspection? Should it rain? There might then be subsequently another one. So there's a little bit more time for fans to organise to get there. But when it comes to a Saturday at 3 o'clock, do we have to look at, if you're having a pitch inspection, then 10 or 11 o'clock, and that is it, you have to cut it off? And remember, obviously, player safety, the priority, but the fans who, inject a lot of money into Scottish football, and really without fans we don't really have much. So on that point, do we then have to have that point where we cut the game off on a Saturday, especially if teams are travelling far, and just say, no, the game is off, we'll rearrange it? Is that a route we need to go down?
I think so. I mean, I don't agree with Rory that there is nothing we can do at this point. This is the only way they can deal with it, is to have a pitch inspection pretty late on. But yeah, I think on a Saturday when you've got so many people travelling, you've got to prioritise health and safety, because I mean Motherwell weren't exactly happy to play that game, and I think you saw by the end they were quite within their rights. Now, obviously Dundee, you've got the point where you might need to take it out of Dundee's hands, because if they're trying to get the game on to sort of hide embarrassment, or trying to sort of maybe just push it over the edge, if there's actually some fears that it's not up to standard, but they want to just get the game done, because they've got a top 6 place to play for as well here. Let's not forget that. So I think it's something that probably has to be taken out of their hands. And I think the league now are aware of the situation, so there should be some sort of short-term protocol maybe put in, where the league has an inspection the night before and the morning, and they decide, because then that way at least the two clubs, the two players, the two sets of fans know what is happening. Because I mean, Phil Clermont's saying as well that he doesn't know how to train, how to prepare, and we're obviously at a busy point of the season, but Rangers could potentially still have been in Europe, and that's then would have been impacting their plans for that as well. So there's a lot of things here that it's wider than just one game, and it's definitely got to be sorted out in case it ever happens again.
Let's stick with Rangers then, Rory. If the game goes ahead this evening and they win, they'll go top of the league. We had a fantastic advert for Scottish football at the weekend when you take out everything else surrounding the Old Firm game and you look at those 90 plus minutes on the park. It really, really is going to be, it's impossible to tell now who is going to be champions this season, isn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly very difficult. I'll be honest, I thought Rangers got away with one on Sunday. I thought Celtic deserved to win the game over the course of the 90 minutes, and I think that it's their own fault that they didn't. I mean, they were 2-0 up in the first half, and Maeda should have scored again. O'Reilly, yes, it's a great save from Butland with a header, but for me, he's got to score. It's a huge chance. And then they get, in my opinion, a fortuitous penalty, Rangers in the second half. I don't think it's a penalty, and they get back into the game, and then from then on, yes, Rangers performed to a standard which is acceptable for Rangers fans in an Old Firm derby. But having said all that, at the end of the game, the 90 minutes after that Matondo equaliser, I think the way the game went, it's a better day for Rangers than it is for Celtic in terms of psychologically.
Is there a lot of chat about that in England, Jordan, now that we've got this title race on our hands? We haven't, as Rory said, we haven't seen one for a very long time in Scotland. So I think it's probably really good. And just actually looking as well, I see that Sky announced record viewing figures at the weekend. It was just a smidge under 1.5 million people tuned into that. So is it now starting to break through down south?
I think it does definitely help, because for so long, Celtic were the dominant team, and by this point in the league, whether Rangers had been there for a while, it was sort of in the bag or nearly in the bag. So I think it definitely does, generate more interest to the sort of average viewer. And you've got potentially England and Scotland going down to the final day, potentially both going down to goal difference. So, there could be something really, really exciting on the final day. But yeah, I think, I don't think the quality at the weekend was great. I think Rangers were really, really poor in the first half. I agree with Rory. Like the Rangers really got away with one, because they could not cope with Celtic's press whatsoever. There was a few players, Tavernier, Lundstrom, Wright, Silva, had a really, really, really poor first half. And I think Celtic, sat off naturally a little bit when they got 2-0 up, but they just stopped putting any pressure on the ball and just allowed Rangers to get back into the game. So, weirdly, I think Rangers would have gone into it thinking we need to win this, because we've got the Celtic fixture, and they've not got a great record at Celtic Park. But I think after the game, it definitely looks like a point gained than 2 dropped.
Right, let's move into the Championship, Rory. You've seen a lot of that this season. Advantage Dundee United given last night's results, isn't it?
Yeah, I would probably go further than that and say that I don't see a situation where Wraith Rovers win the league now. I think they simply had. I mean, I was at Tannadice when they played Wraith Rovers a couple of weeks ago. They bullied them a little bit physically. They were the better side. They deserved their win. You move forward to this point. Wraith Rovers have now dropped another 3 points, and they sit 4 points behind with a handful of games left. I don't see a situation where Dundee United don't win the league now. Raith have still had a fantastic season, but Airdrie seem to have their number. So it's happened more than on one occasion. Over the last couple of years, actually, I don't think Ian Murray particularly enjoys playing against Airdrie, so since he's left. So that'll be an interesting one, shall the two meet in the playoffs.
Like that, is it 10 points or something? I think Airdrie have taken off Raith Rovers this season. So that's huge. That there in itself is clearly been such a big impact at the top of the championship. So we assume then that Dundee will come up, Dundee United will come up. How do they then get Premiership ready? Because they've spent a lot of money. Mark Alden has certainly backed Jim Goodwin. There's been a lot of money spent. It's public knowledge, obviously. But how do they become Premiership ready, and how do they make an impact, just like Tony Docherty has done at Dundee this season?
Well, I think first and foremost, the last time they were in the top flight, their infrastructure drew a lot of attention. Tony Ascar and other guys who in the background seemed to get more publicity than the players did when things weren't going particularly well. So I think they need to get their infrastructure behind the scenes in place. And then when it comes to the playing squad, they need to recruit well. And, these are obvious things. Of course, everybody wants to recruit well. But I do feel like if you look at Kilmarnock, Dundee are a little bit of an anomaly this season when they're doing so well. But consolidation in your first season is massive. Consolidating the first season, whether you finish 9th, 10th, doesn't matter. Stay in the league. Get your current pool of players who haven't played at that level before used to that league, and then add in that sprinkle of experience as well. And then the following year start to add and really push up the league. Kilmarnock being a prime example of staying up later on in the season last year and then really pushing on this year. I think that's got to be the blueprint for Dundee United. Sort out behind the scenes. Everything might be grand now, it might be great, and then moving forward, consolidate next year and take a longer term view. Don't go scattergun, sign, everybody spend a huge amount in your budget and expect it all to come together. It's not how it works. It needs to be slow and steady.
I agree. I think Dundee United now, they're 4 points clear, but even look at the goal difference, it's as good as 5 really, because Raith Rovers I think have conceded over 40, so a 30 goal gap there. So I think they're probably one win away, Dundee United, from securing that. But yeah, I think that you look at the squad and there's a lot of experienced players there who have got top level experience. So I don't think Dundee United will need to go and add another 10, 12 bodies. And that's the one thing I would say is that Scottish football doesn't. There's not enough teams who are preparing to build a team for 2 or 3 years. There's a lot of short-term contracts. Every summer there's turnover, and it's hard to really build something. It's hard to build an identity when you're going up, but you're maybe scared of going back down. So I think that we talk about this all the time. The size of the league maybe doesn't help blood in youngsters as well. But that's definitely something Dundee United have got a great pedigree for. But maybe not as many broken through the last few years and played regularly as there was expected 3 or 4 years ago when they were 16, 17, 18. So it would be good to see a couple of those boys step up another level, a bit like it's happened at Dundee as well. So yeah, I think it's got to be steady, and it's got to be a realisation that there's a gap, but also there's a lot of experience there that should make the adaptation a little bit smoother than if it was, say, Airdrie, who have done brilliant under Rhys McCabe, but it would probably still be a year ahead maybe of what you expect.
Right, let's move on then to the women's game yesterday. Rory, we spoke about how important it was for Pedro Martinez Loza to get a win against Slovakia. They did, but it wasn't it was another uninspiring performance, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, but they got the job done. It's a qualifier, and you need to start somewhere in terms of building confidence. And narrow home win, which maybe the fans would have been expecting a win by a bigger margin and a slightly better performance. However, it is the first win of the campaign. They didn't lose their first game either, so 4 points is, it's not the end of the world by any stretch, and you've just got to try and slowly but surely build the confidence and momentum. And we've seen with the men's team, if you can do that slowly but surely, then you have the opportunity to then win some bigger games and win in better style. So look, 4 points out the last 6. It's not great in terms of performance at the moment, but I'm sure they're getting there.
Gents, right, so that's the Scotland women covered. You may or may not have seen, we stuck it in the group chat last night, AI, it was on the Sportsman's Twitter, AI has apparently predicted the next 80 years worth of Champions League winners. Jordan, you cover the Champions League. I'm just having a look through some of there, right? So to me, Back to the Future is my favourite all-time film, so this is now the equivalent of the modern-day almanac, I think, where Rangers are due to win it in 2068 and 69. Celtic apparently are going to win it in 2063, and there's notable mentions in there for Wolves and for Brentford, Jordan.
Well, maybe by that point, Scottish football's just played underwater after Dundee, so maybe we just adopt a new different style of playing. But I don't know if we would take that, would we? 40 years for a bit of success.
Has Dundee versus Rangers went ahead with this point, Gav?
No, there's another pitch inspection.
The supporters bus is still parked on the motorway waiting to hear.
Right, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time on this edition of the Scottish Football Podcast. A reminder, we are recording it between 6:30 and 7 on the morning of Dundee against Rangers, so we've no idea as to whether it has passed or not, the pitch inspection. We hope it has. Thank you to Rory Loy for joining us, Jordan Campbell from The Athletic, thank you very much as well for joining us. An AI version of Kenny Crawford is in the hot seat with a very much realistic Ian McCall and Stephen McGinn tomorrow. A reminder that the Scottish Football Podcast drops every single day where you get your podcasts, 8 o'clock in the morning. You can also see it on BBC Sounds as well, and links to there from the BBC Sports Scotland website. From me, Gavin Wallace, thank you very much, and fingers crossed we don't need our water wings at Dundee tonight. Bye-bye for now.
The Scotland Rugby Podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby Podcast.
It's just seismic stuff.
There's bucket hats as well.
Oh, really? Yeah. Is this a rugby podcast or is this a fashion podcast?
Why can't it be a bit of both?
Rugby. Let's get on to rugby.
There's a lot to be excited about.
Today's guest, John McGuigan.
Clubs are at the absolute bedrock of everything Scottish rugby's about.
The Rugby Sports Sound Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
You cannot help but be so excited.
It's going to be the centre of the rugby universe.
BBC Sounds.